G'day, I'm Rob Larney, and this is Grown Man Speak. Real conversations for grown men who want more from life. G'day, blokes. In the last episode, I said we talk about identifying what's important, how we get a life that actually aligns with what we want and what that might look like. So I'm back to make good on that promise. So let's jump straight back in. If you haven't listened to episode 2 yet, you're not fucked, but you're not all right either. It might be worth checking that out before this episode, or at least have a listen to it after this, because that's where we explore the unease that we sometimes feel when everything on the surface looks fine. This episode, we follow on from that, and it's a little bit more practical rather than purely awareness-based like the last episode. That said, awareness always comes first. So before we jump into what you can do about it, sorry, got no quick fixes coming up. What we're going to do is pull back the curtain and have a proper look at how misalignment in your life actually shows itself. And we're going to talk about the invisible price that we pay when we live with it for too long. Most of the time, misalignment shows itself in the way that we behave. And it's really important to note that behaviour doesn't determine what you value. Your behaviour is actually a result of what you value. So if we want to change how we behave, we first need to understand what's actually driving us, both towards what we want and away from what we don't want. Most of the time, this misalignment is felt long before it's understood, if it's ever really understood at all. Now, I said in episode 2, and this is the closest thing to a hack that you can get on this podcast. I'll throw one in because it's what everyone bloody wants these days. And the truth is that this is a shortcut. It's just not a 5-minute one. So sorry, guys. But the secret here is to treat that unease as a signal, not as a sign that everything's fucked up. It's information, and if we learn how to read it, it can be genuinely useful. So the job here, the skill that we need to develop, is learning how to notice and interpret those signals. And it is a skill, and like any skill, it can be learned through repetition, practice, and paying attention to the results, doing more of what works, and learning from what doesn't. Now, it's all pretty simple, but it's certainly not bloody easy. I'm going to share with you now a super useful exercise that I used when I was going through this stuff myself, and it's something called the Eulogy Gap. Now, I didn't invent this. I found it in a book somewhere, but that part doesn't matter. What matters is what this simple and slightly morbid exercise does. It highlights the gap between how you're living and how you know that you want to be living. And the exercise is, look, it's pretty straightforward. You imagine your funeral and someone who you genuinely respect stands up to deliver your eulogy. What would you want them to say about you? I'm going to share mine just to give you a little bit of context. So this is the eulogy that I would like spoken at my funeral. Rob was a bloke who just kept trying. He was knocked down more times than most, but his most impressive attribute was that he just fucking kept getting back up. A rock on the outside and a marshmallow on the inside, he called it like he saw it. Fiercely loyal and protective of the people he loved, always willing to help a stranger, he could find a lesson in even his biggest failures. That meant that he could never truly fail. He was more forgiving of others than he was of himself, and he knew it. He owned his flaws. His greatest joy in life was being a father and a poppy. He believed that when we die, we should die empty, having given everything that we had. And he used to say, die with an empty tank. Now, the next bit of this is where it gets uncomfortable, but it's where it actually matters. So based on how you are living your life right now, what would they actually say? Would there be a gap between the eulogy that you would like spoken and what they would actually say about you based on you right now? And I know for me, there was a gap. You could have driven a fucking truck through it. But that's what this work is all about for me. This podcast, the book, the community, it's all me working my ass off to close the gap. And that gap, that is right where misalignment lives. So ask yourself, how big is the gap? I'll put this exercise in the show notes in case you might want to give it a try. And quietly, I would recommend that you do it because I found this exercise really, really, personally, really rewarding and insightful. We can also find evidence of misalignment in the promises that we break, both to ourselves and to other people. Now, I'm not talking about empty fucking platitudes here, the throwaway shit that we all say but don't really mean. I'm talking about the promises that we generally mean when we make them. You know what I'm talking about. The promise to watch your kid play footy on the weekend, the promise to take them somewhere, the promise to your wife that you'll get that job done, or if your wife's anything like mine, that list of jobs done. The promises to yourself that you'll cut back on the beers and start exercising a bit because you know that you need to. It's when these promises keep getting broken, it points to something important, not moral failures or laziness. It shows conflict, and there's conflict either between what you value and what your actual capacity to follow through is, or between two or more values that are pulling against each other. And that conflict, well, it's just another place where misalignment shows itself. Now, I'm going to keep circling back to episode 2 because it really did set the stage for this episode. So, once again, I do urge you to have a listen to that one. But in that, I briefly touched on trade offs and cost. Excuse me. Now, everything in life involves trade offs, and it's not the compromise that tends to be the problem. In fact, compromise is quite often the answer. And we'll come back to that in a minute. The problem is the unowned trade offs, and it's the ripple effect that they create. That ripple usually shows up in the form of resentment, which is the byproduct of unmanaged conflict. Sometimes that resentment is internal. You resent yourself for being undisciplined, lazy, or just plain fucking gutless. Other times it's external, resentment from others when promises keep getting broken, like the wife or kids are pissed because you had to work again. Again, this is all about how you read the data. Is it a signal telling you that something needs to be corrected, or a story that you tell yourself that you're some sort of failure? And that distinction, well, it really matters. Well, that resentment, well, it's like a type of cancer, and it feeds on trust. Trust is built when we keep our word and we honour our promises. Misalignment shows up when those promises keep getting broken because in that moment you valued something else more than the person that you made the promise to. Now, over time, people stop taking you seriously. They start to expect that you're going to blow them off as something that you decide is more important. And it doesn't just erode their trust in you, it fucking obliterates it. And what replaces it is resentment and distance. This doesn't only apply with other people, it happens inside you as well. You stop believing in what you say, you stop trusting your own intentions. And it doesn't just damage self-trust, it damages self-belief. Those negative stories about yourself get stronger, and you start to lose faith in your ability as a functioning grown man. Decision-making becomes harder, sometimes impossible, because you no longer believe that you have the capability to follow through. Even when you are capable, confidence to see it through is gone. And that is the invisible price. So far, we've talked a lot about the signals and the downsides, but there are also clues that can point us towards what actually matters. And you don't have to go on some big, bold, beautiful journey to find them. Have you seen that movie with Margot Robbie and Colin Farrell? Big, bold, beautiful journey. If you haven't, it is a fucking ripper. Check it out. And just quietly, any movie with Margot Robbie in it is worth watching in my book. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to share a couple of ways that I used when I was trying to sort this shit out for myself. First, to identify what my values actually were, and second, to sort them out so that they stop playing a version of Smash Up Derby in my head. Now, the first one is, mate, it's dead set simple, is to sit down and make a list of the things that light you up. What do you love to do? What sort of things reset you? Get a chance and take 5 minutes to write down a list of 20 things that you generally love doing. Now, this list isn't about escape or thrill seeking. I know, sitting on the beach drinking piss, it's probably all right for a few days, but after that, it gets old. We're talking about things that are, a grounded presence, a meaningful connection. What you love reveals what you value, and these are the things that you're naturally drawn toward. The second clue, which is just as important but probably a little bit more uncomfortable, is to make a list of the things that pisses you off. Remember that old segment on Hey Hey It's Saturday? What cheeses me off? Yeah, I know. If you're not over 100, you probably won't remember it. But a heap of radio stations have adopted the same thing. And there is a key insight here. It doesn't just make a good TV or radio segment. Your frustrations are your values in reverse. What pisses you off reveals the things that you hold sacred, and it shows you where your boundaries are. The reason these things irritate you is because they're in conflict with what actually matters to you. Again, these things, they're not instructions, they're signals. And if you learn how to read them properly, they can tell you a lot about where misalignment is hiding. All right, let's lighten things up for a minute because I'm about to bring in a bloke who's been dead for over 2,000 years and somehow still seems to make a lot more sense than a lot of the shit that we hear today. And that's my man, Aristotle. Now, Aristotle wasn't some monk sitting on a mountain thinking deep thoughts all day. He was actually a student of Plato, and then he went on to tutor Alexander the Great. Yes, that Alexander the Great. So he wasn't exactly removed from ambition, power, or real world consequences. And this bloke, well, he wrote about everything: ethics, politics, psychology, how humans actually behave. Basically, if it involved people trying to live a decent life in a messy world, Aristotle had something to say about it. And one idea that I'm going to keep coming back to, I referenced this a couple of times in the book, The Gap, and you're going to hear it over and over again when we talk about a lot of values related stuff throughout the life of the podcast. And this is what Aristotle called the golden mean. Now, despite how it sounds, it's not some airy fairy balance bullshit. And the idea is pretty simple. And the idea is that most things that matter sit between two extremes. Too little of something is a problem. Too much of something is also a problem. Courage is a good example. Too little and you're a coward. Too much and you're reckless. Same with responsibility. Too little and you're avoidant. Too much and you erase yourself. Aristotle wasn't saying find a perfect balance and you'll be happy forever. He was saying that most suffering comes from living at one extreme or the other for too long. And look, we've seen recently here in Sydney what people with extreme ideals looks like in the real world, and history has shown that over and over again with the Nazis and all sorts of communist and dictatorships around the world. Now that is taking it to the extreme, but that is a perfect example of why living at the extremes is not a good thing. And there's one other thing that our man Aristotle understood, and this bit really matters. It is that values are not static. They're not something that you figure out at 18 and then live by unchanged forever, like some personality test you did online after 3 beers or something. They change with the seasons of life. What mattered to you at 20 probably shouldn't matter the same way at 40, and if it does, there's a good chance that you've either stopped growing or you've been stuck in some sort of survival pattern. Aristotle, now, he knew this, and he wasn't talking about fixed rules for life. He was talking about judgment, context, and timing. What looks like courage in one season might be recklessness in another. What looks like responsibility at one point can turn into self-sacrifice later on. The golden mean moves, and this is where I reckon a lot of blokes get caught out. It's not they're not misaligned because they're lazy or they're broken or something like that. They're misaligned because they're living by values that used to make sense but don't anymore. So the work isn't about finding the right values once and then locking them in. It's about checking in, recalibrating, and asking whether the life that you're living still fits the man that you are now. Aristotle didn't just call that a crisis, he called it being a human being. So we can use all these little pieces of the puzzle that we've discussed here today as a little bit of a roadmap, and we can tie them all together because each piece is important. The eulogy gap, well, that shows us a bit of a direction. The broken promises, they're our pressure points. The trade-offs are the cost, but they're also the answer, and it's important to remember that everything has a price. A price you pay for the misalignment, I like to think of it as almost like a fine, and the alignment, I like to think more as an investment. Both of them have cost attached to them, but only one gives you a positive return. The loss of trust and the resentment, well, they're consequences of living a misaligned life. And the extremes that our man Aristotle enlightened us with, well, they're imbalances, and they show us where things should be moved to get life back into some sort of flow, some sort of balance. But all of them, and this is, and I've said this repeatedly throughout this podcast and even the one before, is that they are signals, they are data that we can use to get ourselves to where we need to be. Well, I reckon that might be a wrap for this episode. Look, if some of what we spoke about today has resonated, do us a favour and give the podcast a like. If you've been around, this is episode 3. If you've been around since episode 1, and remember, if you haven't listened to episode 2 before this one, please go back and do it because I think it will just make this land a little better for you. But if you've been around since the start, it means we must be doing something right, and you're finding some value in what I'm talking about here. So please give us a 5-star review. It really goes a long way into towards getting podcast discovered. And check us out over on Facebook if you would like to have a little bit of a chat about what we've spoken here today. Connect with some other men that are in a similar place and sort of get where you're at, because that can be really, really tricky sometimes to speak to the right people when we're trying to navigate our way through life. Check us out on Facebook. There's a page over there, but there's also the Grown Man Community. I'm going to put a link to the community. It is brand new. There's only a few members in there at the moment. I will be in there on a regular basis, so that is the perfect place to reach out, ask some questions, give me some feedback on what you're liking about the podcast. You can also do that when you so there's some optimism for you, when you drop your 5-star review below. Anyway, guys, that's it for another episode. I'm not too sure yet what topic we're going to talk about on the next one. But you can be assured it will be something just a little bit juicy, and who knows? Aristotle might even pop in and say g'day. All right, guys, till next time. Catch you later.